So can you walk us through a bit of the process for conducting a land survey from initial planning all the way to final report delivery?
Sure. So there's a few aspects to it. But I'll walk through, for example, a title reestablishment survey. Okay. So a title reestablishment survey is one of the surveys that can only be done by a licensed surveyor. Simply because it involves the legal definition of where someone's rights actually go up to. So when we get asked to do a title reestablishment survey, the first thing we do is actually to do some searching on not just the title information, but also all survey information. All survey information that would have played a role in making the title boundaries what they are today. Okay. And so when we look this up, sometimes it can take even a few hours, right? When we try to look up all this information and try to digest the information in front of us before we even go on site to do the measurements. And so once we have prepared all this information, we will do a bit of calculations into our software before we actually head out on site. And then when we go out on site, what we're really doing at the start is to try to look for old marks or old common fencing that was located in some of these previous old surveys. Okay. That's really with the intention so that we can re-establish these surveys before us, with the end intention to be able to trace back the lineage of the surveys to work out how the current title boundaries as they stand today was defined back in the old surveys. And that's why it's called a re-establishment survey, is because we are simply re-establishing the old surveys that created the boundaries today. And so that's what we do on site. We find marks and we will connect into them, and then we will use computations to mark the boundaries and also do measurements on the fences. And then once the field data has been obtained, we will then bring it back to the office and spend a couple of hours once again to work through the information that we have obtained, and then come up with an answer that will then result in a plan of survey that will show the results of this survey that we just did. So that's typical in all kinds of surveys as well. Even a feature and level survey, maybe not so much pre-computations because we're really just doing measurements, but there's a lot of work involved after the field data. And in the office, we process this data to come up with the plan.
Okay. So when you mentioned the old survey, how old are you referring to? Are we talking like 100 years old, or are you just talking like 10-year-old surveys?
It can vary. It can go up to 150 years even. So Victoria was founded in the I would say, or I could be wrong on this, 1830s or 1870s, one of them. Okay. And so surveys have been done since then, or even before that. So when the settlers came in from New South Wales, for example, Melbourne itself, Hoddle's Grid, it was done by Robert Hoddle to start with. And there would be a survey record even as far back as then. And so the idea is, when we are re-establishing a title that stands today, is to re-establish the actual survey that created that title. As you know, every title that you see now, or every property that you see now today, is a result some way or the other. So the intention is to be able to work out how to re-establish that survey to work out where your boundaries are.
Right. And you see there's a lot of discrepancy from the old way it was measured to how it should be measured in this DNA?
Yes. Yeah. Of course. So back in the day, people would have been using chains. They would pull chains, and especially in hilly areas, when they use chains, they sag. And so there was a bit of science to it, but it can never be as accurate as the modern instruments that we have. where our instruments now are to the couple of millimeters. Okay, back then, 10 centimeters is a good result. And so therefore, besides re-establishing the title, the survey that created the title that stands today, because of these discrepancies in the accuracy of the instruments for one, there can be sometimes a lot of issues with the title boundaries, where you may think that you are adjacent to a neighbor next door and you share the same boundary, but sometimes when you re-establish both properties, you find that actually the common boundary has a gap in between them, like a little hiatus, for example. And so the laws of today have been set up so that even if we find discrepancies like that, there is always a way to resolve them. So either by taking it up by a transfer of land act application, or if there's an overlap, then we have to cut back one of the properties, for example. And so just because you buy a property and your title says it's that, it is never truly that until a survey has actually been done to verify today what it should be. Okay.
Right. Yeah, especially with the price of land, in the tens of thousands of dollars per square meters, a little bit of differences could mean a lot of money. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was just doing one recently in Peran, where in reality his fence occupied about 40 over square meters more than what he actually had on title. And so this 40 over square meters, we were helping him take up officially on his title. And so, in Peran, and you can tell if you multiply that by the per square meter rate in Peran, you're talking at least 6 figures added to his value.
So what happens then? Let's say someone is in the process of acquiring a site. So they know on title it's supposed to be, 15 meters wide, for example. And then when it's been actually surveyed again, it's less or it's more, let's say. Then what would happen? It has to be within your adjoining neighbors, yeah?
No, so that's what I was saying. It depends. Okay, so for example, let's talk about a scenario where there is more, like your fence or your occupied area is more than your title. But in this scenario, I would say, I'll give you an example in a rural setting. Okay, so in a farmland, and the fence is much bigger than the area that is shown on title. But then we also identified that actually the neighbor isn't affected because maybe there was a hiatus, there was a gap in between their boundaries. And so he can then in that case the client can simply try to apply to take up the land and put it on the title. But then there will be also situations where, yes, you're right, their fence has encroached into the neighbor's property, right? So it depends on the age of the fence. It also depends on the intention of when the fence was put. Was it done with the actual intention to take up the neighbor's land, for example?
Correct.
And so depending on the answers, there will be multiple ways to resolve it. So for example, in the case where, yes, the fence was put into the neighbor's property knowingly, and the neighbor also thought that was where the boundary is. Okay, so they accepted it, and it was like that for 15 over years. So in that case there, now the person that owns the land has the right to actually adversely possess the neighbor's land. Correct. Yes.
So but I think it's about 15 years or something like that. Yeah. Is it?
Yes, the 15 years has to be uninterrupted occupation, meaning it cannot be or 1 year is like that, and then next year you change, and then the following year you change again. So it needs to been like that for 15 years. But it's also important to understand it's not just that, because it's a new fence today, like maybe just recently put in, it doesn't mean that they may not have rights, because the new fence, if it was put on where the old fence used to be, that hasn't changed the position of where the fencing has always been. So even though it's a new fence, there can still be possessory rights over it.